Shalom, Saints, and thank you for joining us for our Searching the Scriptures episode. Each Thursday, we gather with the expectation that Jehovah is going to meet with us here. And so I want you to grab something to write with, grab something to write on, and of course, grab your Bible and prepare yourself for some inspirational teachings, quotes you can use, and of course, the truth that set men free. So stay tuned for Searching the Scriptures. Shalom, Saints. The last thing Yeshua said to his disciples before he ascended was, "Go and make disciples of all nations." This command is known as the Great Commission. Our ministries have taken this commission very seriously and developed a discipleship training program that will change the way discipleship has been done up to now. Most discipleship training programs are denominational in their approach and is doing exactly what the Pharisees and Sadducees did in the days of Yeshua. Yeshua said, "You search the world over to find one proselyte, and you make them twice the son of hell as they were before you found them." The vision of Arthur Bailey Ministries and House of Israel is to be a worshiping people, an evangelistic community, a discipleship center, an equipping network, and a worldwide witness for Yeshua, the Messiah. In fulfillment of the Great Commission, we've developed Discipleship 101.tv. Discipleship 101.tv is a 2-year seminary-level discipleship training program that takes a Messianic Hebrew roots approach to the Scriptures. Now that we've completed this program, we are making it available to people around the world for free. We now have the opportunity to get it into every federal and state prison library and libraries around the nation. We also have the potential for getting this program accredited in universities and Bible colleges around the country. Now here's where we need your help. We need you to stand with us at the $1,500 level to help us get these workbooks printed and DVDs printed and duplicated in order to get them placed in prison libraries around the nation. For your help, we want to bless you with all of the workbooks and DVDs for each class as a thank you for helping us get this valuable information out. For your partnership, you will get all 8 workbooks and all of the DVDs by partnering with us today at the $1,500 level. Thank you in advance for helping us get this valuable, extensive, Messianic Hebrews discipleship training program to the nations of the world. By doing so, we're doing exactly what Yeshua said to do when he commissioned us to make disciples of the nation. Join us in this most important mission of making disciples of the nation by partnering with us today at the $1,500 level. You can partner with us at this level by sending your partnership check or money order to House of Israel. If you would like to pledge your partnership with us and make payments, please do so on our website at www.arthurbaileyministries.com. Just let us know you would like to make a pledge and make payments. Please help us get this material published so it can be placed in prison libraries and libraries around the nation. Partner with us today at the $1,500 level. Thank you. Shalom, I'm Arthur Bailey, Chancellor of the accredited Hebrew Roots University. Hebrew Roots University is the world's first and only accredited theological university that approaches Scripture from a Messianic Hebrew Roots perspective. I'm excited to inform you that Hebrew Roots University is open for admission. Please check out our newly designed innovative website at HebrewRootsUniversity.com. At Hebrew Roots University, you can earn an accredited associate's, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree in several disciplines. We have kept our website designed simple, making it easy to navigate to what really matters, and that is our degreed courses. Please take a moment and peruse through the pages of our website at HebrewRootsUniversity.com. When you're ready to take the first step on this exciting educational theological journey, simply click the Apply Now button and follow the instructions. If you have any questions at any time during the application process, please do not hesitate to reach out to our admissions team using the Got Questions section at the bottom of our website. We look forward to walking with you on this exciting journey. So check us out now at HebrewRootsUniversity.com. That's HebrewRootsUniversity.com. Shalom. The third year tithe, a commandment of caring and compassion. And the reason it's subtitled as a commandment of caring and compassion is because Jehovah cares and he is compassionate. His plan was not just for the children of Israel. Long before there was a children of Israel, there was the plan of the Almighty to provide for his people. Matter of fact, one of the first things he did before he made man was he made the provisions for man. And so provisions, Father knows the things we need even before we ask, and he has provided everything we need. And then he made sure that even as he called the people to himself, that he wanted to make sure that his people reflected him, and that is that they care and be compassionate, especially knowing. And I see how the intent, because Father could have prevented Israel from going to Egypt. As a matter of fact, he declared 400 and some years before they went to Egypt that they was going to go to Egypt and that he was going to deal with the people who afflicted them while they were there. But I also believe that he allowed them to go through that whole ordeal so that they could understand what it felt like to be persecuted, to be mistreated, to be unappreciated, or to be dealt with in a way that no human being should ever have to be dealt with. And in that, they would have compassion. Knowing what they had gone through, they would never, ever be a people who will cause other people to go through these kinds of things. And so, Father, even as he gave them his instruction, made sure that if they were to have hired people, people who sold themselves into slavery, people who fell into disarray, that would come among them and sojourn among them, that they would have compassion, that they would make sure that the poor, the stranger, the foreigner, the alien, the widow, the fatherless was cared for. And so he incorporated that in his word. In fact, he commanded it. And we're going to look at that and how that relate to us today, because that's the important part, is how do we take what Father spoke thousands of years ago and apply it in our lives today. There are too many who believe that the word is old-fashioned, that it's out of date, that it was for people in a certain time, or even today it's for people in a land, or it's for that land. When the fact of the matter is that the Almighty wanted Israel to be a light to the world, that they were to be the example nation to the entire world, that the world would see the favor of Jehovah on Israel and would desire to know the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so that was Israel's purpose. That was Elohim's plan, and his plan has not changed. His plan, brothers and sisters, have not changed. Though we fail to live up to what he has called us to do, doesn't cause him to dumb down his plan. Hallelujah. So, the third year tithe, the commandment of caring and compassion. Last week, and this is kind of like a continuation of last week, even though it's a standalone teaching, it does incorporate some of the things that were brought out last week. For instance, the first year tithe, or the first tithe. This tithe, the Bible tells us, is every year, and it is found Leviticus 27, verse 30 through 34. And just to give you the opening of that, it says, "And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is Jehovah's. It is holy unto Jehovah." And so the first tithe is something that is done every year. This tithe is holy, and it belongs to Jehovah. The tithe consists of all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, the herd, or of the flock. It is not to be eaten by us, our family, not given to the stranger, not given to the widow, not given to the fatherless, the alien, the sojourner, or anyone else. It is holy unto Jehovah. And then there is the second tithe, and this is also every year, and that's Deuteronomy 14, 22 through 27. "Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the field bringeth forth year by year. This tithe is to be eaten by you and your household at the feast." And even in the institution of this tithe, the Almighty expected that everybody would come up to the feast. And so he incorporated in his word the provisions that they would have or need, so that they did not have to miss the feast. Because being that the feast was commanded, there are blessings that are contained in the commandment. The other thing that I saw when I was searching out this matter is that there are specific blessings that is associated to specific commands, and there's the overall blessings that is associated with the overall keeping of the commands. See, for instance, we're going to look at one of them today, but let's just go to this place. "Children, obey your parents, so that it may go well with you, and so you will live long in the land." Now, that's a specific blessing that is associated to a child who obey their parent. It's specific. Now, that blessing is also pertaining as an overall blessing, but it is a specific one to the child. There are specific blessings to a wife who the Bible talks about will, when it comes down to childbearing, you see. There are specific things that the Almighty is asking for that wife so that when she bears a child, it is not a difficult matter. There are specific blessings to a husband. And this we even see in Peter's teaching where he says, listen, husband, don't deal harsh with your wife, because if you do that, your prayers will be hindered. You don't want your prayers hindered, do you? And so Father has incorporated in his word that there are certain things that are there specifically, and then there are some blessings that are unique to the third year tithe. And we're going to see that here. The first tithe is every year. The second tithe is every year. The third tithe, and that should be tithe, not time. You know, sometimes the devil messes with your keyboard, especially if you texting. You notice that sometimes when you text it just changes. And you know what you wrote, and then you send it, and then you see it, and it's like, that's not what I wrote. It's like, who gave the devil permission to autocorrect me? Y'all know what I'm talking about. It happens also in some of these, I have spell check and spell correct, and it corrects as you go. Sometimes, but it doesn't correct a word that is properly spelled, even though it may be the wrong word. Hallelujah. So the third tithe, or the third year tithe, is the third and sixth year. The third tithe is the third and sixth year tithe, and this is found in Deuteronomy 14:28. Now, when we look at tithe, it is easy to conclude that everywhere you see tithe is pertaining to the tithe. But there's specific instructions that is associated with these word tithes found in certain places. And if you read the context, you'll see what it's communicating and hopefully cause us to make the distinction that is there. At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. Now, when I look at this and you look at it at the end of 3 years, it's like, okay, if I bring all the tithe and lay it up within my gate, what am I going to have to go up to the feast? And if the tithe is holy unto Jehovah, and I can't eat it, and I'm not to give it to the stranger, the widow, the foreigner, the alien, then how can I take the tithe and lay it up within my gates? Is Father contradicting himself? And that's the issue. He's not contradicting himself. Maybe we may not be understanding it, which is why we have to look at the whole counsel. So he says, at the end of every 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he has no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. That Jehovah your Elohim may bless thee in all the work of thine hand, which thou doest. Now, in this particular passage, he puts the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, the widow in the same category. But there's something else. And last week we looked at the first tithe and what the Almighty did with that tithe. We won't go into that today. You have to look at that teaching. The third year tithe coincided with Shemitah, the year of release. You say, well, how do you come to that conclusion? Well, we just take a look. The 7th year Shemitah year is the year of release. Now, the thing about Shemitah, there were several things that took place, and we did a teaching on the Shemitah. It's in our bookstore. We did it a couple of years ago. And this pertained to several things. One, Shemitah was a year of release. It's the year that debt was to be released. Two, Shemitah was a year that the land rested. There was to be no planting, no sowing, and no harvesting. And then three, Shemitah was also part of the counting of sevens to the Jubilee. So in the seventh year, there was to be a release, and then there was a counting up to where any land that had fell into the hands of someone other than the property owner or the family line in the year of Jubilee, that land was to be returned to its proper family. And so you had all of these things that were associated, and Shemitah, the counting of sevens, is what counted up to Jubilee. In Leviticus 25:1, and Jehovah spoke unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto Jehovah. And so the Shemitah started the count from the year they entered in the land. So when they entered in the land, the first, second, and third year, the tithe was laid up within the gates. The fourth, fifth, and sixth year, the tithe was laid up in the gates. And then the seventh year, there would be no growing. Now, the thing about Shemitah is the land rested. It didn't mean that animals stopped getting pregnant. It didn't mean that they stopped reproducing. You see, Shemitah was associated with the land, and so was the third and the sixth year tithe. Every 10th animal still had to be tithed. Every 10 sheep, every 10th goat, every 10th cow or ox still had to be what? Tithed. And then within that, every male that broke the matrix was also redeemed. So we saw last week that there was just not tithe and first fruit offerings, first and second tithe and third year tithe. There was also vows, free will offerings, thanks offerings, dedications, redemption. And so, Father, within the system of commands, established an economy. There was an economy that Israel, as the light of the world and the light of the nations, was given so that their economic prosperity will be totally dependent on Jehovah. The economy was dependent upon Jehovah. In fact, one of the most incredible places on the planet, 3 times a year, millions and millions and millions of dollars flowed into it. Because the people would come from all over the land, and those who had been scattered would come up, and they would bring their offerings, their tithes, their vows, their free will offerings, their dedications, their commitments. And I'm telling you, there would be such a flow to where they actually had to have money changers with currency from all over the known world so that people who came up with the currency of those nations could exchange their currency. And so you had a currency exchange, you had a banking system, you had probably the biggest marketplace. I mean, this, when you envision it, it was a vast system of economics and of government. You see, the government of the kingdom, Father established. The governments of the world and the nations, men established. And Father never ordained worldly men to govern his people. And so that in itself puts us in two world systems: the government of the kingdom and the government of the world. And what religion has done for many has been exactly what the Almighty said would happen with the man of lawlessness, is that he would move us off of the government of Jehovah. He would change the days and times and law. And men would begin to operate on a different system. And I was just thinking just the other day, I was a little frustrated because I love this time of year. Now, and I had to assess, what is it that you like about this time of year? And it wasn't just the fall, it was the time. Because this time of year, the time is regular. During the other time of year, it's manipulated to where now the sun sets around 6:30. 7 o'clock is dark. In the summer, it doesn't get dark until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and sometimes after 10. And our body has to adjust to all of this. We're constantly adjusting, constantly confused. And by the time we get adjusted to the time, they change it. And it affects us mentally, it affects us emotionally, it affects us spiritually. And when you go into a country where every day, winter, spring, summer, fall, the sun goes down right around the same time, and it comes up right around the same time, and there are countries out there who have decided that they will not adopt the manipulation of time, which is at the hand of men. The government of the kingdom is a different system of government. The economics of the kingdom is a different system of economics. And how we manage resources and the economics and funds and land and life and relationship. Father has established that for the people of his kingdom. And so the confusion is that we're trying to figure out how to live in two kingdoms, and because his kingdom is not visible, it's easy to just gravitate to that which we see, which forces us to walk by sight. And without even realizing it, we're walking by sight. The fact of the matter is that the sun sets when the sun sets on the 6th day, the 7th day began. Now notice this about us, brothers and sisters. It is the only day of the year we operate on kingdom time. It's the only day of the week. When the sun goes down on Thursday, we don't say it's Friday. When the sun goes down on Wednesday, we don't say it's Thursday. Because all of the other days of the week, we go by the midnight time, whereas on Friday evening, we go by kingdom time, one day a week. And we don't even realize we're doing it because we've been so manipulated and moved off of the economy of the kingdom to where we just automatically gravitate, and unless you intentionally and forcefully put yourself in a kingdom mindset, you will constantly be manipulated. And so, Father says, when you come into the land, here is the beginning of months, and this is when you start your count. Now, this count was perpetual, but because of the manipulation of time, it's difficult for us, and because Israel never celebrated a Jubilee, in fact, it seems that they didn't even let the land rest. We know that the reason they were carried into Babylonian captivity was because of the fact that they would not let the land rest, which suggests to me they adopted another system of economy. Their economic system caused them to work, plant, reap, sow, harvest, and they got caught up in the economics of the world. Because see, here's the thing. If you make your livelihood by crops, what are you going to do that seventh year? How are you going to care for your family? How are you going to eat? See, and Father answered all those questions right there in his word. Verse number 3, 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land. A Sabbath for who? Jehovah. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. So what is he saying? He's saying, listen, everything that I produce is going to reproduce after its kind. The seed that the Almighty gave the children of Israel was a seed that produced and reproduced and reproduced and reproduced and reproduced. It wasn't genetically modified. It wasn't a one-year seed that had to be planted every year. Now, the seed that they planted the following year came from the crop that they harvested. So they harvested crop, but they also harvested seed for the next year's crop. Whenever we got a crop that doesn't produce its own seed, we got a problem. There is a serious problem. And through the manipulation of time and economics, the scientific community have now been able to design seed that don't reproduce, which causes people to come back to them year after year and buy new seed because the seed doesn't produce anything. If the seed doesn't produce, then what are we eating? We're eating something that don't produce, and the Almighty said everything he creates produce after its kind. If we're eating things that don't reproduce, going into a body that is supposed to reproduce, is it possible that that which don't reproduce can affect the reproduction system? Is it possible? That's a major impact on this body that came from the ground that is supposed to reproduce after its kind. So it is designed to consume that which reproduces after its kind. And most people in the world today could care less where their food come from, but Jehovah knew from the very beginning that the food source was the important life-giving, life-sustaining source in the earth, and he made provisions for it. In fact, it was so critical, and I'm going to show you something here. The Bible says that when the land, let me just go back. Notice what he says here in verse 4. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land. A Sabbath unto who? A Sabbath for who? So if he says, I want the land to rest, who am I to say I'm not going to let the land rest? Now I'm going to show you where the confusion gets. Here's where the confusion is. The confusion is, it's his land, but I think it's mine. If it's his land, I have to do what he say. But if it's my land, I can do what I want. And the people forgot whose land it was. And I'm going to tell you something. Jehovah reminded them over and over again. I'll show you. That which it grows of its own accord, of course, of thy harvest thou shalt not reap. Now, what he's saying here is you can eat it, you just can't sell it. It's not to be carried to the market. You get it, you eat it. Neither gather the grapes of thy vine, undress. Just let the grapes grow. Well, what happens if nobody eats it? They fall to the ground, and you know what it does? It refertilizes it. For it is a year of rest unto the land, and the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, for thy servant, for thy maid, for thy hired servant, for thy stranger that sojourneth with you. Now, and for thy cattle, and for the beasts that are in thy land, shall all the increases thereof be meat. Notice what he's saying, because see, this is the compassion. You see, it says, listen, you're not going to sow, but the land is going to produce. How is that if they don't sow? Because what has been sowed has the ability to reproduce after its own kind. So, there's going to be enough food, he says. If you do like I say, it's going to be enough food for you. It's going to be enough food for all your servants. It's going to be enough food for all your maids. It's going to be enough food for all your hired servants. It's going to be enough food for all of y'all, the strangers, the sojourners. It's going to be enough food for your cattle, for the beasts that are in the land. Now, the beasts that are in the land could be other than cattle, which I don't think. I mean, it could be cattle, but he's already mentioned the cattle. So this could be very well the wild beasts. You see, Father already showed us through Messiah that he cares for the sparrow. Everything that he made, he has produced for a reason, and there's a food chain. That's why when I watch the spider does what spiders have been created to do. I watch the ant. The ants do what they've been created to do. The cockroaches, the maggots, the shrimp. Now notice the order I put that in. And for the cattle, he's concerned about the cattle, the beast, and everything else. At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. And so he's saying, listen, if somebody comes to you in the 6th year and they know next year is the year of release and they want to borrow money, and you say in your heart, it's the 6th year, they're going to borrow money and not pay me back, I'm not loaning them anything. Father says, of a foreigner thou mayest exact it again, but that which is thine, which with thy brother thine hand shall release, save when there shall be no poor among you. For Jehovah shall greatly bless you in the land which Jehovah your Elohim giveth thee for an inheritance to possess. Now, he continues to reinforce and reassure them that if they follow the commands that he's given them, that he's going to make sure they get blessed. Only if thou carefully hearken unto the voice of Jehovah your Elohim, to observe to do all these commandments which I command thee this day. And Moses commanded them, saying, now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to Deuteronomy here, because there's further instructions on this 7 years. And I know we're talking about the third year, and I'm going to show you how this connects. And Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release, in the Feast of Tabernacles. So we see that the 7th year release coincides with tabernacle in that year. And this is when it's to be done. That the release at tabernacle is the end. You could release it any time, but the deadline is tabernacle. When all Israel is come to appear before, let me back up here. A person who is genuinely sincere about their walk in faith would not borrow with the expectation that it is the year of release, so I'm going to come to you and borrow money with no intention of paying it back. Because the Bible says, he that borroweth and do not repay is what? Wicked. The wicked borrow with no intent of paying back. The wicked borrow and does not repay. So if a person has in their heart, and Jehovah knows the heart, that they're going to borrow in the 7th year, knowing it's the 7th year with no intent of paying back, what does that put them in? It puts them in the category of the wicked. And so just as I, as a person who want to walk and uphold the commands of the Almighty, then every person who is genuinely connected to the Almighty and want to serve him and for him to be pleased with them is going to examine their hearts and not do that which is wicked. Moving forward, when all Israel is come to appear before Jehovah your Elohim in the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Gather the people together, men and women and children, and thy stranger that is within thy gates, that they may hear and that they may learn and fear Jehovah your Elohim, and observe to do all the words of this law. The promised blessing for obeying this commandment of the 3rd year tithe and Shemitah. And let me say here, everyone is impacted. Because people will say, well, I'm not a farmer, so that don't apply to me. Well, I don't raise animals, so that don't apply to me. Now, if what you eat comes from the land, the produce, and the animal, and you're not a farmer or one who raises animals, then what are you going to eat? How do you eat? Now, I just stop and let people think about that, because people are always trying to get out of something, don't knowing what they're getting into is starvation. Because if you don't grow your own food and you don't raise your own animals, then you now have to buy food. Now, where you getting your food from? Because if the people you're buying your food from is not applying kingdom principle, and the children of Israel, because see, everybody is impacted by the land resting, otherwise they don't eat. And you know what happens if you don't eat for a while? So I just thought I'd throw that in there. Whether you are a farmer or a herdsman or not, you're still dependent on the crops and animals for eating. Either you raise them or you barter. Either you raise them or you buy them. And well, if we're only supposed to tithe from the land, well, you know, if you buy food, you got tithe. Because all of a sudden you got produce. You shall not therefore oppress one another. Leviticus 25, we're going to jump back. But thou shalt fear your Elohim, for I am Jehovah your Elohim. Wherefore you shall do my statutes and keep my judgments and do them, and you shall dwell in the land in safety. Who's going to assure this safety? Father. What if the people don't observe and obey him? Is he obligated to assure their safety? See, that's where that whole idea came from, protection money. For me, that's how I saw it. It's like, you know, you talk about, what's the Godfather? Almighty Father is father of the Godfather. And the Godfather is only on this level. Are you hearing me? Father is almighty. And so if anybody is going to get any protection money, it's going to be him, because he is the one who ultimately is watching over all of it. And the land shall yield her fruit. Why? Because Father's going to tell it to. The land is going to do what he tell it. And you shall eat your fill and dwell in safety. Now here's the question. And Father, anticipate the question. And if you shall say, what shall we eat the 7th year? Behold, we shall not sow nor gather in our increases. So if we don't sow, there's not going to be anything to gather in. So what we going to eat? He said, don't worry, I got you covered. I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years. Amen. Now you talk about a harvest right here. You sow, and he bring in enough for 3 whole years. Who gonna do this? So what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is that all of this and everything that he commands and everything that he gives his people to do is based on trust. It's all based on faith, brothers and sisters. And if you don't have faith in him, then you're not going to believe him. If you don't trust him to do what he said he's going to do, you're going to take matters into your own hands and not do what he say. And so how do I know that in the 6th year, he's going to give me 3 years of produce? How do I know that? I don't. Do you hear what I'm saying? Me, in my own mind, I don't know. So I have to trust him just to do it. But that doesn't make sense. How are you going to reap a harvest of 3 years when the last 6 years you've been planting? First year you got a 1-year harvest. The 2nd year you got a 1-year harvest. The 3rd year you got a 1-year harvest. The 4th year you got a 1-year harvest. The 5th year you got a 1-year harvest. And now he's telling me this 6th year. And what's interesting is, because we just, year before this year, we actually planted, because in 2016, we let our land rest. Now, I'm not a farmer, and we don't raise animals, but I have a garden. And during that year, Shemitah, our pear tree produced so many pears, the branches just broke. Just couldn't hold them all. And I brought a lot of them here. And then this year it didn't produce anything. Not one pear. I don't know why. But we planted tomatoes and we planted peppers. And I had taken all of those tomatoes and all of those peppers off the vine. And, the area was just simply dying, turning brown. And one day I went out and I noticed flowers on the tomato plants. And I noticed flowers on the pepper plants. And now my tomato vine has all these tomatoes on it. My pepper plant has all these peppers on it. And I'm thinking, it's fall, it's going into winter, and it's like I got a new crop of tomatoes after I've harvested all of those tomatoes and peppers and have brought them here, and people have taken them home and cooked them and ate them. And now there's I just went out and picked tomatoes up, And I'm amazed. Now, Miss Sharon said, well, that's what they call a bumper crop. And I know this, I only planted one set of seed in that garden. And it boggles my mind that those vines are filled with produce. But it also reminds me of who brings the increase. Because I know I haven't done anything. Matter of fact, it's like a lot of those tomatoes just died because I wasn't taking care of it. And I was taking what I could, and sometimes I forget, and I go out of town and go out of the country or whatever the case. Well, not out of the country, but out of the city, and didn't pick them before I leave, and I get back and, they done start turning on me or whatever the case may be. But the thing of it is that it's Father who gives the increase. And it goes the same way when it comes down to evangelizing. One plants, another waters, but Elohim. And this is the process in which he has in his entire creation. But he says, I'm going to bring forth fruit for 3 years. Now this, brothers and sisters, you got to get your mind around. Because the children of Israel that Father spoke these things to directly to Moses didn't believe him. Because they wouldn't do it. And I would dare say that it's possible, I can't say. Father knows the intent of our hearts. If I was the planter, and the 6th year I'm seeing all of this produce, I'm the kind of person, I'll tell you the kind of person that I am. See, I keep tax papers and I measure. Every month, I measure this month against last year month. I'm measuring October's income 2017 to October income 2016 to October income 2015. And I have these records because I'm seeing, okay, here's where we were this year in this month. And then I'm looking at last year, this month. And then the year before this month. And what I'm seeing is Father consistently blessing. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing him, and this is the thing that bothers me, is that with seeing this, I still, from time to time, find myself going into a place of worry. When I've got the records, do you? Do you know where you were at this time last year? Financially? Because when you compare, you're going to either see a decrease or you're going to see an increase. We know where the increase comes from. Because if you're not doing anything different this year than you did last year, you follow what I'm saying? And this is where I believe David would reflect back and he could see Father who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Just as I trusted in him 3 years ago, trusted in him 2 years ago, I should be trusting in him this year and plan to trust him next year, because he has consistently shown me that he's always got our back. And so I could see in that 6th year, because if you brought in $200 worth of produce, and then here you got about $400 or $500 or $600 worth of produce, that should say something to you. But for some people say, man, look at this. I can't wait till next year. Because he spoke to this, he spoke that to them when they first came into the land. They are supposed to go up to the feast and hear the words being spoken to them year after year after year. And somewhere, while they've gone up to the feast during this 6-year period, that which he spoke to them and promised the blessings of obedience if they did it, somehow it slipped their mind. See, saints, you can become dull of hearing. Oh man, I done heard this brother speak. And I hear people, and sometimes I be wanting to disable the comment section on some of our videos because people say some really wild and terrible things, and it never amazes me of how hurtful people can be and how less thoughtful in their remarks and comments that people can be. And you just have to see it but don't see it, and take the good with the bad. And so I see some of that stuff that people say, while at the same time I know what Father has said. I understand that when I left Sunday to start keeping the Sabbath, there was a lot of people who wouldn't understand, nor will they do it. Now, if I'm a person who is influenced or affected by the crowd and the majority rule democratic mindset, then I would have stayed where I was, but I knew where I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And each day and each week and each month and each year and each feast, Father continues as we are growing closer and closer to him and trying to obey him to the best of our ability. When he see that we are walking in the truth of what he's revealed, he reveals a little bit more. And when we walk in the truth of what he's revealed, he reveals a little bit more. So here I am. I started keeping Torah in 2003. It's 2017, and I've never done a teaching on the third tithe. I've never even understood there was a second tithe. I heard about it. And it's like, well, why haven't you revealed it? Well, you haven't set your heart to know. You see, when you set your heart to know a thing, he'll reveal it to you. But if you don't, he won't. And so there are people who have arrived where they are, and they will not move beyond where they are because they've concluded that what they want to know, what they need to know, they know it. And anything that is contrary to that, they're going to argue and fight because they don't want to go any further. Now, you can be like that because I knew before I stood up and started doing this. I've already heard it. There you go, trying to get some more money. Well, you know, the third year tithe don't go into the Levite, into the priest's pocket. Doesn't go into anybody's pocket. This is for the widows, the orphans, the fatherless. It's for the stranger, the sojourner, the Levites. This has nothing to do with personal gain because, see, I've been struggling over the last couple of years of how do we deal with the less fortunate among us? How do we deal with the poor among us? What is our responsibility and obligation to the widows who come? What is our responsibility to those who are transitioning? Because when I transitioned from Sunday to Sabbath, all of my support went away. Here we are generating hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year, and it's gone. Because the people who was supporting that work said, this boy done gone off. He done gone back under the law, and law, no, I can't support that. And we had an open house for a new building, and nobody showed up. We used to could pack a house. I got pictures of packed houses and open houses and fundraisers. And we had this fundraiser, or actually it was an open house for our new facility we were in, and nobody showed up. Because we transitioned from Sunday to Sabbath. And I knew then. Father told me, he said, listen, you know, when you go down this path, these people are going to be gone. And I didn't want to accept that. And I didn't want to believe that because these people have been with me. These are my people. These people, we thick and thin. The stuff we have gone through, no, they will not leave me. You know what I'm saying? It's all right. I ain't going to argue with you. And man, I was so broken. Got this food, got people all dressed up and ready to greet. Kept watching for the door. It was hurtful. But he warned me. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so when people make that transition, folks turn on them. Some of them lose their job because when they get to the point to where they say, listen, I can't work on the Sabbath anymore. Well, you signed the paper, and when you signed it, you said that you was available to work at any time. Yeah, but my position and my faith has become more alive and meaningful to me. Well, you're just gonna have to make a choice. And see, this is why the kingdom need entrepreneurs. It not only need people who can sustain themselves with the creativity and the ability that the Almighty has given them, but who can take that creativity and ability and expand it to where now they can hire and bring people on. You understand what I'm saying? See, and walking in the kingdom with the Almighty is never selfish. It's always about being blessed to be a blessing. And I'll tell you about me, I've worked for people, and I'd much rather be the boss than the one who has to answer to the boss. Now, I also learned that when you are the boss, you still got a boss you got to answer to. And the ultimate boss is the one who says, now you watch how you treat those servants. You watch how you treat your servants, your sons, your daughters. You watch how you treat the people who work for you, because just as you are to enjoy your Sabbath, so are your servants. Well, they don't keep the Sabbath. They don't believe my faith. Do you? And you know what's really tough? Having a servant who want to work on the Sabbath. Now it gets to be contentious. No, you can't work on the Sabbath. And believe it or not, there are people who, they get their little work in. See, like Father don't see it, but see, what they do on their Sabbath is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to make sure they ain't working for me. You see. And you shall sow the 8th year, and eat yet of old fruit until the 9th year, until her fruits come in, you shall eat of the old store. The land shall not be sold forever. And here's another one that just really, it's like, man, Father just slips in a reminder. He don't slip it in, he puts it in. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is whose? Whose? And then he does something. He says, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. So I'm basically, he's saying, I'm the landlord, you the tenant. It's my land. It will always be my land. It is not yours to sell. And even if you sell it, you can only, if it's 40 years before the Jubilee, you can only sell it for this much. If it's 20 years before the Jubilee, you can only sell it for this much. If it's 5 years before the Jubilee, and he gives these instructions indicating that it is not the land, but the crops. It is not the land, but that which they sow in the land, because in the 50th year, it's got to be reverted back to its original owner. Why? Because that's the way he said it. Well, what if I don't want to give it back? Father's got a solution. It's called Babylon. It's all right, y'all don't want to let the land rest. You don't want to celebrate the Jubilee. Okay, I got news for you. I'm bringing some people to get you. And they're going to take you off my land. And while you over there suffering, my land is going to get the rest it needs. So you either give the land the rest, or the Father removes you from it. Jehovah reminded Israel that he was the landlord, the Lord of the land, which is what David proclaimed. David understood this. He said, the earth is Jehovah's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. You see, I'm amazed that looking at the fact that Jehovah sent the Babylonians to take Israel out, which says the Babylonians had to obey him. The Babylonians said, man, we don't care about no Israel. We ain't even thinking about that land. Father said, go. And when you get there, this is what you do. For this cause did I raise you up. Father's got a way of dealing with hard-headed, hard-hearted, stiff-necked, rebellious people. I don't want to be that person. I really don't. Because I don't want him to deal with me the way he dealt with some of those people in the book. And I saw how he dealt with some of those people in the book. You hear me? I saw how he dealt with his beloved, with the firstborn of the nations, with the apple of his eye. It's like, man, I ain't going out like that. You Yes, sir. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. That word stranger is ger. He says you are ger, a temporary inhabitant. It's not your land. I'm letting you use it. It's not your life. I'm letting you use it. They're not your children. I've given them to you for a season. It's not your money. You can't take it with you. Everything is mine, and the sooner you realize that, the better. Because now, if you get it and you learn how to operate, what you're going to do is you're going to get my heart and my mind, and you're going to see, just like I own it all, I'm going to share it all with you. Amen. And that's what he said to Israel. I'm going to raise you up above all the nations. You will be a lender and not a borrower. People will come to you. Why? Because you got it. The people who are in need are going to come to the one who has it, and that's supposed to be you. We are supposed to be the people that the world looked to. You and I. And I won't stop preaching this until we get it. Amen. I really won't. I know when I start talking, I feel it. I start talking about entrepreneurs and all the people who got jobs cringe. And you know as well as I do, you got to ask somebody to give you the time off to go and serve your God. You know it. And you know Pharaoh don't let you go sometime. So they cringe. You start, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I don't have no skill. I don't have no ability. I ain't no entrepreneur. Who told you that? You see, the beauty of Jehovah, the example of Israel, is if he know how to take people who have been slaves for 400 years and bring them into a land and make them entrepreneurs, all they had to have was a renewing of the mind. That's all. They had to go from a slave mentality to a landowner. They had to go from being somebody who was allowed to stay in the land at the master's discretion, who didn't want to let them go, to their own land. And everybody that he brought out of bondage, he says, I'm going to give you your own land. You're going to have your own house. You're going to have your own well. You're going to have your own fruit trees. Now, what you do with it is up to you. But I'm saying I'm bringing you out of bondage to make you a landowner. I'm bringing you out of slavery to make you a master. Now the question is, you can hold on to your slave mindset, or you can take on my mind to take on the land that I'm making you landowner of, or landlord of, or you get it. And then this word sojourner is another word for foreigner. He says, listen, you in bondage, I got some land. I'm going to bring you out of bondage, and I'm going to set you in the land. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to make you slave like Pharaoh. I'm not going to beat you. I'm not going to, sell you off or treat you like you're lower than dirt. I'm going to treat you like real human beings. And I want you to treat everybody else the way I treat you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to watch over you. I'm going to fight your battles. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to give you everything you need and then some. That's what he said. That's the promise. I couldn't imagine where people would want to abandon all of that to go in religious bondage. But many do. When will we as a congregation start the third year tithe? That's been a question that people ask me. At the end of 2015, we ended Shemitah. 7 years earlier in Grand Rapids, Michigan, we had kept Shemitah. And I see the first 3 years and then the second 3 years leading up to the 7th year, which is the Shemitah year, which says to me that the 3rd and 6th year tithe is aligned with Shemitah. So we ended Shemitah in 2015. This is 2017. And then 2018 would be for us the 3rd year, of which that entire year you take the 10%, which is holy unto Jehovah. That's the tithe that is his. You take the second 10% from the 90 that is left, which is actually, once you take the 10%, you got another 100%. Now, I know we've said 90%, but it's not 90, it's 100% of what's left. And so you take 10% of that and you got another 100%, which some would say is 80%, but it's 100% of what's left. And you take a 10th in the 3rd year, and during that year, that is stored up, it is saved up. Now, the 4th year, 2019, the 5th year, 2020, the 6th year is 2021, which is the next 3-year period. And then the next Shemitah is 2022. That's when the land rests again. So that will be 7 years from the time the land rested in 2015. That's my calculations. As a congregation, there's a couple of things you can do. I advocate for this one, and some would say, well, yeah, you would. And the reason why is that in the church, and in the Messianic communities, there were people who, like the folks who stand out on the street corners with the signs asking for money, there are people who would go from church to church, just like those folks would go from car to car. And they would go from people to people. And I remember several times I would come and I would see a person who would come to our service and they would avoid me. And it's like, why they avoid me? I couldn't get that. Is that, I'm not a wolf. I'm a nice guy, especially, most people who take the time to get to know me see that I don't bite. I floss. I try to keep my breath, decent. If I ever get in your face and my breath stink, just say, hey, bro. And I'll go and clean my mouth out. I got mouth cleaner. You know what I'm saying? I put on cologne. I try not to smell, like I haven't showered in a few days. I try to smile. Try to be nice. So, I'm trying everything to be approachable. The children call me by my first name. I'm not demanding somebody call me doctor or apostle or pastor or any other thing. So I see myself as this easy to approach person, even though some people say, well, with all that, you still ain't that approachable. And so I have to work on some areas. But I couldn't understand why people would just flat out avoid me until I trailed them. And here's what I found. I found people with sob stories going to, and they find the most, the one who's got that do-gooder look on their face. Because I was watching who they were gravitating to. And I walk up and I see them hurry up and put their hands in their pocket, and they just hit that person up for some money. And then they hit that person up for some money. And they were just going through the congregation hitting people up. And folks was giving them because they were thinking, hey, I'm a believer, and somebody asks you, you give it to them, and it's like, okay. How do you know their intent is right? And why are they avoiding leadership? What's their motivation? What are they doing? How do you know it's even a sheep? How do you distinguish between the wolves who dress up? You understand what I'm saying? As a congregation, we can bring or you can send the third tithe, and we could distribute it to those who have been identified that have need. Because see, here's something that I learned. That if you have a poor person, there are things that you can do to help that person stop being poor. They just have to be willing to work out. The world already does this. If you go to a nonprofit organization, they're going to take you through an assessment. Why? Because they got hundreds and hundreds of people coming, and they want to maximize their resources and put it in the place where it's going to most likely bring some kind of yield. And the yield is to help you get from beggar to giver. That's the whole point, is to get from being somebody with your hands out to somebody who's helping people. You get what I'm saying? So there's processes that you can implement. For instance, a budget. We all should have some kind of budget. You should know what's coming in, and you should know where it's going. Because if you understand that you are a steward, you're going to have to give an account for that. You just can't spend money willy-nilly, not even the 90. Some people got the idea, well, I just tithe 10% and the 90% is mine. No, don't you remember? He said, you have robbed me in tithe and offerings. That in itself should say that it's not just about the 10th, if you have an understanding. And so when it comes down to identifying, and I see this principle operating in the New Testament writings when it comes down to the early congregation and how they manage the widows in the midst of them. So some people can say, well, yeah, I won't give y'all my 10. I'm going to find somebody myself. And that's okay. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just saying to get the maximum benefit out of the third year tithe, we can be effective in not only helping and supporting people, but helping to move them from somebody with their hand out to somebody who's ready to put something in somebody else's hands. And that's the goal, because if you don't give them and help them move from that place, then a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, they're going to be at some point, and you know I'm right about this, if somebody keeps coming to you over and over and over again asking for money, at some point you're going to tell them where to go. At some point you're going to say, oh, wait a minute, I just gave you money last year, and I gave you money last week, and I gave you money last month. What you doing with your money? Where's your money going? Because see, if we believe that Father supplies all of our needs, then somewhere in the mix, I have to come to the conclusion that he has supplied your need. What have you done with the money he has supplied your need with? What have you done with it? Are you spending it on drugs? Are you spending it on alcohol? Are you spending it on women? Are you spending it in gambling? Are you mismanaging it? Do you have holes in your pocket? You follow what I'm saying? If you really want to help somebody, sometimes you got to find out where the problem is and then help them resolve it, not to condemn them, but to correct it. The second tithe should be started now so that you can begin saving up to attend Passover, unleavened bread, Pentecost, and Tabernacle. You see, Father intended for his people to come up 3 times a year, not once, but 3. And he incorporated in his economy a means by which they would have the resources to do that. But it's going to require, again, proper management of resources. We're going to have to properly manage our resources. And when you begin to properly manage your resources, you're going to identify where the leak is, where the hole is, where the excess is. And I remember when I was struggling with tithe, and I started tithing, and Father began to show me how to be a better manager of money. I mean, here I am spending $30, $40, $50 a week on vending machines, eating packaged, processed food. Y'all remember them hamburgers you got out the vending machine? You had to put a pound of ketchup and a half a pound of mustard just to make the thing taste good? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Come on, wave at me. Some of the nastiest stuff you ever ate, but it didn't stop you from going to that vending machine. And here it is, you got a wife who cooks wonderful meals, and you got leftovers, and some of it has been in the refrigerator for so long you got to throw it away because it done start changing on you. And Father says, your wife is cooking. Why don't you take some food from home? At least you know what you're eating. Save your money. And then you know where I really, man, I'm going to tell you, Starbucks will not only eat your breakfast, Starbucks will eat your lunch and your dinner. I mean, who pay $5 for a cup of coffee? I make coffee better than Starbucks. So I bought some beans, I bought a grinder, and I bought a coffee maker, and then got one of them Stanley mugs. And I got good, fresh coffee, better than that powdered junk that coffee machine was pouring out. The point is that Father knows how to show you how to save. But once you begin to manage, because I didn't realize I was spending that amount of money on vending machines until I started asking, where's the money going? And when I start creating a budget, and then I start seeing, because that $3 here and that $3 there is just $3. But when you start adding that $3 up, pretty soon you realize that you're spending a lot of money and you got no account for it. Get account. The first tithe should be given every pay period. The first tithe is holy unto Jehovah. So I'm going to stop there, and I got some other stuff, but I'm going to leave it there. And then we're going to give you a moment. It may take a few moments longer. Yeah, a few moments longer. Any questions, any comments, and be nice.
This program is made possible through financial contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479.